Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to COASTER-net Update. We've got some breaking news from Sandusky, Ohio. Most of you have probably already heard, but Danny, I've been getting text messages from people all over. Like, I go to school, teachers are walking by, I get text messages from my neighbors. The largest roller coaster.
People at my work are going nuts. They're like, oh my God, did you hear the news about Dragster?
Yeah, it's like this, and everyone's calling it the second largest coaster in the world, shutting down forever. And I don't have the heart to tell them.
Well, yeah, it's
probably
like,
not happening.
Well, today I was feeling a little punchy today when one of our interns said this. He's because he's a little bit of a coaster guy. Like he's not a coaster enthusiast of sorts, but he knows I am. It was like, oh, did you hear they're tearing out Dragster? I was like, no, they're not. They're lying. Like, I was kind of being a jerk for a while, and then I explained kind of what I think everyone else is kind of saying right now, and it's like, well, the whole as we know it, because the announcement, of course, came out earlier this week. The top Thrill Dragster, as you know it, is being retired. So we have to sort of delve into what that means, right? Oh, by the way, this is the first time ever that Cedar Point announcing a roller coaster was not really big news on this show. I know you and Steven did a CP Unlimited talking about it, but like you and I haven't even talked about the fact that Cedar Point's getting another roller coaster. I don't think we need to. The Dragster news, quite honestly, is much bigger news.
Well, yeah, and I guess you have to break this down a little bit, because a lot of people are like, oh my God, they're tearing it out. And I think both of us come down on the side of that's not happening, because I think at the very simplest terms, like,
if they were tearing it out, they would have said that.
They wouldn't have
announced it the way they did.
And they would have announced that it's closed permanently, and so we can assume that it's some sort of renovation. And I also think I'm on the side of, and maybe you are too, that I think a simple LSM conversion and a moving of the queue line and a retheme of the entire ride, I don't think those three things warrant this type of announcement.
No, not to me. I think we've all been saying for a while that the launch was probably going to change. In some regard, there's been a lot of work around the launch area. It looks like they've removed some hardware from the launch area. So it seems as if the hydraulic launch is certainly going away at a minimum. The obvious, they're not putting a lift hill on the ride. I mean, there was some funny stuff out there, but they're not putting a lift hill on the ride. So the first thing we have to answer with the phrasing top Thrill Dragster, as you know it, is being retired. If they were tearing the ride out and it was never to operate again, in my opinion, they would have said that. They wouldn't have announced this and say, we will have more updates later. This isn't a Son of Beast thing where they're trying to decide what to do with it. As we know, top Thrill Dragster is
had plenty of time already to decide what to do with it.
So the first question we need to answer is top Thrill Dragster in another form, whether it's a new name or whatever, we'll get to that in a minute, is that ride, that roller coaster that is sitting there, going to reopen in some form? I think the answer is yes.
Well, and we also know from pictures from the park obtained through various channels that if you go to the park this week, you're going to see an entire construction fence be put up along the wall of Dragster. I've also been told that the ride sign is gone completely, although I did not see a picture of that, so I cannot confirm.
Okay.
But I've heard that is also the case. So I think a retheme is probably in line. But I guess the question becomes here. One, can a simple LSM launch be retrofitted onto this ride in its current state?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, like, if you read Intamin's website, they claim their launches can go up to 124, I think. I haven't seen that in a while. What other LSM launches that don't have the cable do we know of? Like you.
So the immediate one. So it sounds like you and I both agree that the ride in some form is going to operate again, and it also sounds like I think the simplest thing, in my opinion, the whole as we know it thing. If we were just changing the launch from a hydraulic launch to an LSM launch, that to me doesn't feel like
and as we know
worthy of that language. Even relocating the queue outside the ride doesn't warrant that type of language to me.
Because honestly, you can put an LSM launch on that right now, and 80% of the people riding it wouldn't know the difference.
Right.
So there's no point to saying
right. So at this point, to me, that the as you know it language that was used in this announcement means that Top Thrill Dragster as a ride name is almost certainly going away. And I think people are saying that the dragster car that was in front of the exit area in that Victory Lane area where the exit area is, that's gone. I think that may have been gone already, but I think people are saying that it's
came
gone.
And went, and I don't know
And now that the ride sign is reportedly gone, and depending on what meme accounts you follow, it might have been replaced by either a Dollar General or a Spirit Halloween sign. But so to me, the launch, I think, is probably definitely a possibility that's changing. I think it's definitely almost a sure thing that that's happening. So probably almost definitely a sure thing that the queue is moving and not going to be in the ride, and they might even be reconfiguring the station in some way to go along with that to keep everything external from the ride. You're saying that we've gotten some photos or some reports that there's construction walls around the launch area,
around the whole ride, around the station as well.
Okay, so they may be doing some sort of station reconfiguration to go along with a queue reconfiguration, but the fact that the ride sign is going away when it was there with the notice that Top Thrill Dragster was closed for the season, that to me says that the name is probably definitely changing. They just repainted it not too long ago, so maybe they'll do something and keep the colors. Red and yellow and white, are not super unique colors.
You could change that red to a maroon real easily and finally make it the King James coaster like they wanted to.
Or you could just give it the accelerator treatment and let it fade for 10 years and then it becomes pink.
I don't know about that. I don't think that's ever. I've never seen Dragster as pink. Shockingly, I don't know why.
No.
So here's the question: are they going to have to take height off of it if they want to put LSM?
And this is and so here's what I did. I looked up some LSM rides, and a lot of them are mock rides. Red Force is the one that immediately comes to mind in terms of being a tall, fast LSM. Red Force at Ferrari Land over by Portaventura in Spain. That is an LSM. It's 367 feet tall, and its speed is 112. It's 0 to 112 in about 5 seconds.
So you're in the ballpark, but
we're not far from the 420, 120 that Dragster is known for.
So if you could get that LSM up to 120, 121, you might be able to hit the
now those trains are only 3 cars, so there's only 12 riders per train. So are we looking at now that ride, of course, Ferrari theme looks like an Indy car or a Formula One car. So, could we be keeping a similar theme, but be changing the name just to kind of like break the stigma? And maybe we're going to get Red Force style trains that are only 12 riders. And maybe that's part of why the station needs to be reconfigured to respace out the gates for loading multiple trains at once. And they could do the Maverick thing, because then you've basically got Maverick trains, right? And you could maybe load 3 at a time. And you could stage the blocks differently. Certainly if you redo the launch, you've got to do something with the control system and have that overhauled, because that's going to work a little bit differently. Your entrance, your loading station, a potential unload station is going to work differently. Maybe the unload station goes away altogether, and now you can load and unload 2 trains each, all in that one station. There's probably endless possibilities as far as station configuration that is all dependent on what happens with the trains, which is very much dependent on what happens with the launch.
And still, I think we're still in this discussion, not at a point where I would say would warrant what they've said. Like, you do new trains, you do a new station, you do a new launch. I still don't think you're at the point. Like, I think you physically need to change the ride. And the two biggest ways that I think you can do that is, one, now Red Force, because that's the other thing too, is could they use the new trains on the old track? And Red Force uses those new Intamin trains that, for all intents and purposes, are pretty good. People like those trains, generally speaking, right?
Yeah, I think so. A couple other rides. So if you look up LSM launch, there's a difference between like a rolling launch and a standstill launch. So like Maverick is considered a rolling launch because it doesn't come to a stop. Another one that we've talked about on this show before, I think during Roller Coaster Roulette, is that Nefeskesin ride over in Turkey. Now that only gets up to 68 and its top hat is 164, but that's a rolling launch. Takabisha and Mutant Ninja Turtle Shellraiser have rolling LSM launches. Caracho, Junker, Linet, a bunch of the Euro fighters and Infinity coasters over in Europe. So there's plenty. Even Pantheon is a rolling LSM launch that gets up to 73, but Red Force is the obvious comparison here.
So the question is, do they take height off of it? Do they add height onto it? Those are both, I think, viable options. Like, you could steal the world's tallest record again very cheaply, just as Six Flags did. Like, you could steal it, or do you have to go the opposite way and take height off of it because you're number 2 anyway? So what in the long run, what does it matter?
Does 400 feet really matter?
Like, just make something that is going to crest the hill every single time that you don't have to worry about as much as you did with Dragster. I think those are two options. I don't know if I care about either of them. Like, maybe the tallest one is like, okay, that's kind of cool, but I like, okay, Dragster's just reopening at that point. But what if, right? What if you do a little dippity doodahs after that initial top hat, kind of like what Accelerator does a little bit, where you do some turnarounds. Like, you do have space back there to add track. You have space across the island, on Adventure Island now, whatever they're calling it, Millennium Island, I don't even know anymore. That there is some space on the other side there where you could put some track that goes over the water and back. So there is space in the area to actually add. I'm not saying adding an entire ride. I'm saying maybe add 30 more seconds of track, 45 more seconds of track. So instead of waiting for a 20-second ride, you have like a minute-long ride.
Well, do you think maybe they just do what the larger Accelerator coasters after Dragster, like Stealth and King Dakar, and do you think that they just replace the brake run with just an airtime hill?
Which I think maybe solves some of your problems with having to cut down speed in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
Like that Dragster stop was pretty hard. Like, that's a hard stop. And I've never been on King Dakar. Every time I go there, the damn thing's closed. But I personally would like to see something like, because Fahrenheit isn't that long of a ride and it does a few things here and there. I'm not saying it needs to do as much as Fahrenheit. Even Storm Runner does a few things after the launch. And I think Storm Runner is a fantastic ride. Maybe just adding an element or two, after that launch. But once again, that's the question. How do you retrofit all of this? Do you have to put a whole new track on it? I think you're okay with the supports. You can retrofit the new track onto the support system already there, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could make an adapter pipe.
And just looking at it, the supports look fairly, Red Force uses fairly the same supports. Like I'm
You
sure
could always, they could fabricate an adapter pipe or something. That one's not a problem at all.
So I think if you kept the height of the hill and then added a little bit at the end, that's my best case scenario here. And that would actually fit with what they're talking about. Like, and maybe that's a high hope. I think that's a high hope on my end, that they add 2 or 3 elements to actually make it more of a roller coaster than 18 seconds.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that one's a long shot.
You think so though? Because you have the space.
But I think that one's a long shot purely because we haven't seen Cedar Fair spending the big money, and this is going to be another hit to the wallet as it is.
Here's the other problem. The other problem is we haven't seen Cedar Fair work with Intimate in forever. So I think that's the bigger hill here. But anything you do, you're going to have to work with Intimate on, right? Like, unless you tear it out. Like, there's no way around
there's
like no other
question
company is going to come in and take that over. Like, you're not going to see Mac Rides come in and take
over. And Mach doesn't do the big launches. I mean, they do quite a bit milder launches. I mean, you know, Copperhead Strike, Blue Fire, Time Traveler. I mean, those are not intense launches as we know them.
So, like, I think anything that renovates this ride has to bring Intimate in. And if you're going to bring Intimate in already, why not go all in on the project and say, okay, let's add 3 more elements. Let's spend $10 million. Like, we already have the bare bones here. Spend $10 million. And now you have a brand new ride that people are going to want to go ride for $10 million. It's kind of like the whole RMC philosophy, but with a steel coaster.
Here's another option, because I'm just spitballing here.
I'm just throwing out ideas that I'd like to see. Because changing it to an LSM launch doesn't make me excited at all. Like,
so that's a great segue into one of my other ideas here. And I don't know how you do this, because I don't think it goes through Intimate. I think it goes through SNS. But what if they made it an air launch somehow, like Max Force?
Well, Max Force, you still have the moving parts issue, don't you?
You do.
And Max Force's launch is good, but I don't know. I don't know. And then would another company come in? So that's the big reason I don't think that's going to happen. But, you know, just the liability issue of using someone else's track and steel that they built and you putting your stuff on it, I would be like, eh. The other idea you had when we were talking on the phone one day was what if it's just a theming change? And I'm not talking about name and color. I'm talking about what if you put a tunnel and launched it out of a tunnel?
Like launched it out of something, out of a building of some sort.
And like you put some sort of theming, and you know Cedar Fair is all about the theming right now. And you might argue, well, doesn't Maverick do that already? And I would say, okay, yeah, but maybe you do it better than what Maverick does, because Maverick's just a dark tunnel you launch out of, so it's not like
and I mean they brought back the railroad signs and the noise and the noises, you know.
But do you put video screens up there like Six Flags did with West Coast Racers and put some sort of pre-show?
And if you do an LSM launch, then you have the ability to do. I'm trying to think of a good example. You have the ability to do. Well, yeah, you have the ability to do what Velocicoaster does. Manta down at SeaWorld San Diego does the same thing too, with the waves and the tunnel where the train actually rocks back and forth. You have the ability to do that kind of thing if you do put it in a building. You know, you can't do that with the hydraulic launch, the way that it has to lock onto the catch car. So there's opportunity to do that type of stuff, sure.
I'm trying to think what else you could do. Do you put
what do they theme it? What the heck did they theme it to? I have no idea.
Do you put a backwards spike on it to make it go faster?
That's another idea. Do you turn it into a swing launch and have it go both ways? The problem there is now you can't load multiple trains at once unless you like completely reconfigure the whole darn thing.
you could push the station back.
And you would have to turn the current exit area into the load area somehow. That one seems to be a little bit more difficult to do unless you have the loading station, and then that doesn't work the way that the top hat, because right now it goes straight out. I was going to say you could have it like as a spur, but the station is part of the main section now, so you would have to. I guess they could excavate the station to some extent and build a spur as part of the.
And then I don't know how much space you would have moving backwards with Iron Dragon there. Like I feel like it's on the same plane.
Or you could do the Mr. Freeze thing where you've got the switch table for launching.
Which, like these are all interesting options. I think I really believe that I don't think this is just an LSM change, because if you, like I said before, if you were going to do that, 80% of the people wouldn't know the difference anyway. So like, if you're going to do that, you would just do it and be like, okay, because people thought they were already doing that.
Right, before they did the announcement.
Before they did the announcement, there were people lining up. Oh, they put the lights on it. Oh, I've seen them working over here and they're taking out this and that, and they're just going to put an LSM on it. Okay, so people already thought they were doing that, just going to reopen it as Dragster. So why would you go through the whole rigmarole? I think there's a little more here. I think you're going to.
Oh, there most definitely is.
I think you're going to see a height. I think my best case, the most likely is you see a height increase or decrease with an LSM, or I think you see a completely redesigned second half of that ride. Where is it just a hill, one airtime hill? Is it a few dippity doodahs and an airtime hill? I think there's some opportunity there. Could you just add you could add an airtime hill, like that's no issue. Just make the track.
It does seem like, because you didn't hit the brakes until after you came across the finish line thing anyway. Yeah. It does feel like there's going to be some sort of track change, whether it's the height, a hill, a spike, something else.
I do think you're going to see all of the track. I think the supports will stay, but I think all of the track is going to change to the new.
Oh, you think they might like straight up Hulk it?
I think they might straight up Hulk it, because like Intamin doesn't really do that track style anymore. I guess they could, but if you're going to change anything, you're probably going to have to,
Well, they could also have an adapter piece or whatever. I mean, like, you see that Millennium Force changes from the square to the triangular track, and I mean, we've seen Morgan,
and that's assuming that they're the same gauge if you're using the new trains. That's the other issue.
Right.
We don't know if the trains are the same gauge or not. I've never really looked at it that closely.
They may not be, but I mean, like, we have like Sky Rush goes from the single spine to the double spine, and I-305 has the double spine. Velocicoaster has multiple different track spine styles. So there's something like what you're suggesting, where some or all of the track gets replaced. That's certainly not an issue.
Yeah, I and I'm slightly excited because I'm a person. I know Stephen Lynn really wanted to talk about this, but I brought you on instead because you're an engineer. Well, you probably, and I said you probably have more expertise.
What my degrees say.
Yeah, that's what. Well, yeah, we don't know about actual knowledge. We got a piece of paper. But like he's not a huge fan of Dragster. I was a person where, if there was a line that was less than 10 minutes, I would go ride it, but I'm not standing in line for over 10 minutes for that ride. But now you do a little bit more. You put a few more elements on it, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe I do stand in that line now. Maybe I do go,
right.
And ride it more often than what I did. Because a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to stay in line for an 18-second ride, and I completely understand that. Plus, the old restraints, the seat on me for bigger people, the seatbelts were very tight. We're much tighter on Dragster than they ever were on Millennium, and it wasn't always like that. But recently, the Dragster seatbelts have become very tight and cumbersome, and I would love to see the new Intamin trains, because from everything I've heard is that they're pretty forgiving, right? Like, Those are the Terran trains, correct?
Yeah, the Terran trains that now Pantheon, I can only assume Terran, I mean, Velocicoaster, all of those rides are very, very comfortable. They do have to get the lap bar down a certain amount. But yeah, they're extremely comfortable. Absolutely.
Yeah. So like I like those trains. Like if you discount, if you can get the seatbelt on, those trains, like the old Intamin trains, are still some of the best trains ever on Millennium and Dragster. But if you can kind of
those trains are super comfortable as well.
If you kind of wiggle that and allow, not to have to pull it down as much, maybe. And I don't know if that's the case or not. I've not been on the new Intamin trains myself yet. Probably next year with Pantheon. I didn't get on Velocicoaster this year. But that's another reason too, is like, hey, you get the new trains, and assuming that they're safer, like, okay,
Yeah.
But I do think we're looking at here something a little bit bigger than just an LSM change. Like I just, if that's what it is, I'm befuddled as to why go through this, except to get maybe this buzz talking of, hey, the second world's largest roller coaster. But I don't know if that's the buzz you want, that you're closing your coaster.
Yeah, I don't know. I think at minimum we're seeing launch change, queue relocation, and name/theme change. I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be surprised even if we get some track change, some track addition, a track subtraction, or I think station reconfiguration has to come along with the queue reconfiguration. I think those first things, the launch change, the queue change, and the name and theme change, I think those three are probably certainties. Yes. And not even just some of those three. I think all of those
all three of those things.
And I think the name and theme change is absolutely 100% gonna happen, because people were already suspecting the launch and the queue change, and I don't think that warrants the language they used, as I said earlier. I would not rule out at all the launch or the track topic. I think it's maybe a little bit more unlikely, but again, would not be surprised at all.
Hey, do they still have that Centurion? I've heard they still have a Polaris as one of their.
Polaris would actually be quite an appropriate name.
I saw one of the people from CP Insiders. I think, I don't know if that was them or not. They were talking, and they would say, well, Polaris would actually, if you do a space theme, you already got Millennium as a space theme, you got Magnum as a space theme, so why not go all in with Dragster as a space theme? So
Gemini.
Yeah, Gemini. So like you could, that whole back, you don't realize it, but you're walking through a space theme park back there. Like, who knew?
Yeah. Boy, that's
That's something, right?
Yeah. It's not. And Power Tower, I mean, you could easily do space theming there.
And Iron Dragon, that and you could have an Iron Dragon in space. Like, there's Power Rangers.
Yeah, the only oddball there is Corkscrew, and that's really kind of generic. But like Power Tower's there, right?
Yeah. Well, Corkscrew has like the blue and the swirls, like
right. That kind of
be like a black hole theme. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that kind of fits in there just fine, to be honest.
Yeah. So. Well, we'll find out what's going on here, hopefully sooner than later. Maybe.
Yeah.
You think by the end of the season we'll have an answer here?
I guess the question is whatever going to be for next year, because they already announced what they're doing for next year. So are they?
Yeah.
It's got to be a 2024 thing, right? So maybe we won't.
Yeah, I doubt that we get this next year. I that would actually be the more, unless you're just doing an LSM switch, which would boggle
in which case the announcement is all the stranger.
Yes. So well, we'll find out. So we'll keep you guys updated. As always, thanks for joining us here on COASTER-net Update. I'm, of course, Andrew Barchak from Chicago, Illinois.
Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
As always, right on, right Warriors.
Hey guys, thanks.